Kam Franklin has earned playing time this season for Ole Miss.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. I am Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. Thank you very much for tuning in. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Hotty toddy, everyone. Today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast dives into the impact of a former five-star defensive lineman who's been turning heads since he's been arriving at Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin. Over the last 9 months, his work ethic has caught the attention of defensive coordinator Pete Golding. And Golding mentioned that while the depth on the defensive line is really, really strong with leaders like Princely Emmanuel and Walter Nolan, J.J. Pegues, and Jared Ivey, this young talent will likely see the field this season. He's just not sure how much yet. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. And don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC, Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy, and even Zach Blackerby at Locked On Auburn offers other perspectives on college football, the SEC, and yes, even Ole Miss. You know how I feel about perspective, so check it out. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Now, Kam Franklin was an Under Armour All-American. He was the highlight of the 2024 recruiting class. There was a big recruiting war with the Auburn Tigers. Everybody remembering what that is all about. But Kam Franklin stuck with Ole Miss, committed to Ole Miss. Once he was with Ole Miss, he was completely all in. He went to the bowl game to see it against Penn State, actually missed the Under Armour All-American game, reported to Ole Miss early, and has been making an impression ever since. He is 6'5", 275 pounds right now. He is really similarly built to Jared Ivey. Now, he is a name that is being talked about over and over again. He got brought up in the press conference when Pete Golding talked to the media, and Pete Golding said, hey, this is a player that has earned playing time this season. He's just not sure how much with how talented this defensive line is. Now, if you look at this defensive line, Princely Emmanuel and Jared Ivey, J.J. Pegues, Walter Nolan, when you look at backups like Echoles Stone, Xavion Harris, Chris Hardy, you can see that it's going to be tough sledding. And that is not to any way put down Kam Franklin and what he can be, because literally just about any other season in Ole Miss history, especially in recent history, Kam Franklin would be expected to play and expected to play a lot, to where you're going to walk out and play 50 snaps every Saturday. And that's just the way it's going to work. But the way it sits right now with these upperclassmen and this defensive line being as good as it can be, Kam Franklin does get the benefit of being able to kind of learn to be a defensive lineman in the SEC this season. He's going to sit up there and probably back up Jared Ivey, who is at 280 pounds as well, when you look at this defensive line. And he's going to sit there and learn like a sponge. He's probably going to get a good bit of playing time this season, though, especially in those first 4 games. Now, in the SEC games as well, you could see a situation where he plays quite a good bit. I do not expect either him or the other players that we talk about today necessarily to redshirt. They're honestly too good to redshirt. But the talent level of this team is at a next level type position. Kam Franklin, a defensive end from Lake Cormorant, Mississippi. The Gators, by the way, really big defensive lineman that kind of got to out-athlete everybody he went up against in high school football. When he arrived at Ole Miss, there was a little bit of a learning curve. As with every freshman, this isn't anything about him. This is just about freshmen learning how to play college football. But as his athleticism has grown and his size, and he's hit the hit the meal plan, essentially, the weight room, all of that to get to the point where he is exactly where he wants to be. And now he's at a point where he can actually soak up the defense. And there's a good chance. I think he has absolutely earned the right to be Jared Ivey's backup this season. I think he can do it. I don't know exactly how many plays that will account for, but he's good enough to make that pay off as a strong side defensive end, kind of a Marcus Tillman type role, if you want to think about that. Him and Jared Ivey is kind of a perfect match on that side of the ball. Now, Kam Franklin also has the versatility, just like Jared Ivey, to move inside when he needs to. He's played some 3 technique at the high school level and in the all-star games, like the Mississippi-Alabama all-star game, he did a little bit. And that is something that everybody needs to keep an eye on, because Ole Miss does have the ability with these 10 players to have a little bit of a race car package. There's a situation that you could see lined up on defense on 3rd and 17 against, I don't know, Wake Forest against Kentucky, where it's Suntaran Perkins, where it's TJ Dudley, and then the inside guys is Jared Ivey and Kam Franklin. Whenever you just want to go race car, Indy car, whatever you want to call it, he can pull that off. He's a name that we've heard a little bit during camp in the fall. He's been in and out of a black jersey, but I tell everybody all the time, do not pay attention to the black jersey, because the black jersey does not necessarily signify that you are injured. They do load management on this staff. You could be just having a day off, and sometimes that happens. And sometimes it's a real injury, but the fact they do that, you never really know. So until, I don't know, the week of the game, do not pay attention necessarily to who's in a black jersey, because they're all working out in different ways to be as good as they can get. And they're an extremely mature, grown-up team. And because of that, they can be treated a little bit differently than everybody else. Kam Franklin is coming up in that. Like I said, in 2005, 2006, that time frame, whenever I was at Ole Miss, you had a situation to where I think Prey Jerry came in. Prey Jerry came in and everybody knew he was going to be the guy. And that was when Ole Miss had, I think, potentially like Jeremy Garrett, like the leftovers from that 2003 team. Patrick Willis was on that roster as well, but they were trying to find defensive linemen that fit. So they ended up with like Ted Laurent and Prey Jerry and those guys. And early on, they had to play. Greg Hardy, when he got recruited by Coach O, was expected to come in and play. He was a good player. Any other year besides this year, Kam Franklin would have walked onto Ole Miss's campus and gotten 50 snaps. He would have. He's been that good. He's not going to do that this year. He has earned the right to play this fall, but that doesn't necessarily mean he is. And when you look at what that defensive line could be, it could be a situation that he plays mop-up time. It could be a situation that he actually does get in the rotation and plays 10 to 15 snaps of meaningful football every Saturday. This defensive line is different. This defensive line is a bear. And because of that, Kam Franklin, everybody might say, well, what's going on with him? No, it's just a situation that depth and talent at Ole Miss along the defensive front and in the front seven is different than it has been for the last 40 years. I can't remember it being this deep in my life. The only thing close to it, and this is just top heavy, was in 92 when you had Norman Hand and Tim Bowens. I mean, Prey Jerry and Ted Laurent in 2008 was really good when you had Greg Hardy on the outside and Marcus Tillman on the outside. But when you look at this defensive line, it's different. Walter Nolan might be the best defensive lineman that has ever come through the University of Mississippi before this is all said and done. Princely Amamiellan is Greg Hardy level pass rusher. I mean, you look at comparisons and comps, and I love doing comps, but this is special. Kam Franklin and Jared Ivey, a match made in heaven and a really good football player. Kam Franklin has earned the right to play. I don't know how much he's going to play, though, because of how talented this unit is. It's nothing against him. It's just the way it is. Kam Franklin isn't the only defensive lineman making waves. William Echoles is proving that he's everything that Ole Miss has hoped for and even more. Sticking around to hear about how he is featuring in this defense. Game Time is the place to get your Ole Miss tickets with the killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets. So there's not a bad seat in Vaught Hemingway Stadium. We all know that. But Game Time does allow you to see exactly what the view will be from whatever seat you're getting in Vaught Hemingway Stadium. And this season, you do want to make sure you're in the best possible seat you can be in, especially as expensive as tickets might get. They do have the lowest price guarantee. They have event cancellation protection, job loss protection, all the customer service bells and whistles that you would be looking for. So take the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets with Game Time. And with this being the most anticipated season in Ole Miss history, I might be able to help you out with buying tickets. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen, check out Locked On College Football Podcast with Spencer McLaughlin. He gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron with discussion of the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, and the new expanded playoff. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's not much of a secret that the 2024 recruiting class was very defensive line heavy. That's where Ole Miss made their bones in the 2024 recruiting class. When you get a Kam Franklin, the top player in the state of Mississippi, William Echoles was a fast riser that went from a low-level 3 stars to starting at offensive guard in the Under Armour, or not the Army All-American game, the San Antonio version, whatever it's called. It's not that hard to see when you have Jeffrey Rush, who was a 4-star on 3 and Rivals and 247, all of those. Cam Beavers from Bay Springs. Also, you can see that Ole Miss on this defensive line class, they were very intentional with what they wanted to do. So it was really interesting to see if Ole Miss hit on these prospects. And honestly, we won't know if they truly hit until later. But some names that we've obviously heard Kam Franklin, a lot of that because of how good of a prospect he is. But we also heard William Echoles, who didn't get into school until this summer. So fall camp was kind of the Ole Miss fan base, first impression of this young man. He arrived at like 6'3", 6'4", 315 pounds, and extremely athletic. Randall Joyner immediately worked this guy out whenever he was at Houston High School and said, hey, this guy's a defensive lineman. He moves like a defensive lineman. And everybody else was saying, no, he's an offensive guard. Even to the point he went to the All-Star game in San Antonio, and they played him at offensive guard. Steve Robertson actually laughed at Ole Miss for thinking that he was anything other than an offensive guard, which that rivalry is absolutely ridiculous to start with, but it happened. That doesn't change. You need to understand that William Echoles, Randall Joyner was right. And William Echoles, in through these first 5 or 6 or 7 practices, now he hasn't hit the wall yet, and most freshmen hit that wall, but he has shown everything that Randall Joyner and Lane Kiffin and Pete Golding have thought that he would be. Now, again, just like Kam Franklin, William Echoles in 2005 would be expected to play. He would be playing 40 to 50 snaps a game as a true freshman. We all remember whenever a player comes in like this at Ole Miss, that freshman plays a great bit. This defensive line is a different animal, and him lining up behind J.J. Pegues and Walter Nolan, if he's playing 40 or 50 snaps a game, something went horribly wrong. But I do think that he's earned a little bit of playing time. Whether, I don't know, it's 10 snaps a game, maybe it's on field goal, but obviously the blowouts and stuff like that. There's a chance that 5 or 6 games this season, Ole Miss might be up to the point where William Echoles plays a good bit as well. So we'll see how it looks. He is a really good player. He's an athletic guy, excellent bend. He can play with his hands. Even as a defensive lineman, I do not understand how people missed on him. Now, when you look at his final ranking, he was Army All-American or whatever that San Antonio version is called. He's nearly a 5-star if he was. And everybody's like, what do you mean missed by that? Well, the fact of the matter is 6 months before that, he was a low-rated 3-star and everybody was arguing on what he was going to do. And Houston was doing the Chris Jones plan of hiding out their player so that they could be funneled to Mississippi State. Ole Miss found this guy. He worked out at a camp. It turned out William Echoles' sister, I think, attended Ole Miss. Ole Miss found him, worked him out, and decided immediately, it's like, hey, this guy's a defensive lineman, and he's an excellent defensive lineman. So he's 6'3", 6'4", 315 pounds right now, roughly the size of J.J. Pegues. We talked about Jared Ivey and Kam Franklin being roughly the same size. You have a J.J. Pegues clone a little bit developing in William Echoles as well. Echoles is a really good football player. I'm looking forward to see what he can do, but it's a situation where he has probably earned a little bit of playing time, and most every other year at Ole Miss, he would get that playing time. This year, with the depth of that defensive line, it's just kind of bad luck. Now, the good news for him and Kam Franklin and Cam Beavers and Jeffrey Rush and Jamarius Brown and all of those guys, it's this. Most of those 4, they're going to graduate. Echoles Stone's going to graduate, and the whole defensive front is going to have to be rebuilt. That is the reason they went so hard on the defensive line in 2024. You do need time to get them developed. You want them to be developed, and in 18 months, they're probably going to be there. So we'll see exactly how this looks for Ole Miss, but the defensive line's in great shape moving forward, even though Walter Nolan and J.J. Pegues and Princely Amamiellan and Jared Ivey and Echoles Stone, those guys are probably moving on to the next level. It's going to be Cam Beavers, Jeffrey Rush, William Echoles, Xavion Harris, Kam Franklin. Those are going to be the beasts that happen on the defensive line. Now, whether Kam Franklin moves to the 3 technique or out wide, you could have 2 interior defensive linemen by the time this is all said and done with Kam Franklin and William Echoles. And then you have like Beavers and Rush as the outside people. Plus the transfer portal is always going to be a factor with a Lane Kiffin team. You can hear by the tone of my voice, I enjoy talking about this. Maybe it's just being an Ole Miss fan. We love freshmen, new players. Like, to this day, I still remember Jesse Mitchell in 2003 on a fishing trip with David Cutcliffe talking about this freshman that's playing that's going to be the real deal named Patrick Willis. To this day, I remember that, and I like freshman-type players. And it's really cool because on Wednesdays, there's not a practice, not a viewing that you can sit with. So those Thursday shows are going to be very centric on things like freshmen, surprises, all of that, to where you kind of can play a little bit with what's going on. So coming up next, we're diving into a few more freshmen you need to know this season. These newcomers could be game changers for Ole Miss in the near future. So stay tuned for that. Really interesting stuff. Ole Miss they've signed 2 really good defensive linemen in William Echoles and Kam Franklin. So there's no surprise that they kind of led this show. But I did want to add a couple of other freshmen that honestly needed to be mentioned. One is TJ Banks out of Tuscaloosa, Alabama. He was an Under Armour All-American game. So this is a player that I have seen up close. Me and Brian Smith, the Locked On Recruiting czar, was down in Orlando, and we got to see TJ Banks work out. He was a guy that played a lot of safety at Tuscaloosa, but whenever he got down at the Under Armour game, they lined him up kind of in that slot corner type position, that Husky, that John Saunders type position. And you could see that he was a little bit uncomfortable at the beginning, but he picked up on it really quickly. Now, a lot of that is it's an all-star game. It's a week long. You have to be able to pick up on stuff quickly or you're going to be in trouble. But he was able to pick it up and be ready to go. So I'm curious to see if TJ Banks is going to make an impact this season. He's a guy that I think is special teams level. You will see him play on punt return and kickoff and stuff like that. Pay attention. He's number 19, I believe. But he is a really, really good football player with the pedigree of being really good as well. If everybody remembers, over the course of last season, TJ Banks was recruited by, I think it was an Ole Miss State battle. It's one of the rare Ole Miss Mississippi State battles that we see anymore. He decided on Ole Miss and stuck with Ole Miss the entire time, and just a really, really good football player. Now, another player that has been being mentioned over and over again, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that he plays a splash position, but he's also making plays in individual drills, although there probably aren't reps to get him on the field in wide receiver unless we're up by 55 points against Furman, okay? But I do want to mention this player because I think he warrants a mention, and that is Noreel White. He's a wide receiver out of St. Martin on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. He's a guy that I think has a chance to develop into a really good slot wide receiver for Ole Miss in the future, and also punt return and all of that stuff. He has all of the tools needed to be a really good player. Now, he's made some really good catches. His movement and athleticism is absolutely off the chart. That's the reason that everybody is talking about him, because when they watch those first 5 periods of practice or whatever it is, that athleticism is what jumps off the page. But we're not sure exactly how he fits in with the rest of the team and how much he's going to play exactly. All we know is that he is showing himself to be really toolsy and could be that surprise player that all of a sudden you find him on the field. It would not surprise me if Noreel White, by the Arkansas game, is gotten the confidence and is back returning punts. He's that type of player. He's a Taboris Fisher type athlete of the phone booth quickness kind of. Noreel White is a really good player. Now, we talked yesterday about Deion Smith, and we'll see on tomorrow's show, we'll talk about whether or not he shows up at this practice. Like I said, I think that with everybody saying stuff about Deion Smith and Bruce Feldman reporting that he's done, it's basically done. It's a win, not if situation for Ole Miss at this point. And Deion Smith, with the 4 non-conference game, by the time Kentucky rolls around, he is going to be ready to go. And we've all described what that can do for the wide receivers. But Deion Smith and Trey Harris and Caden Priestcorn and Juice Wells and Jordan Watkins and Caden Lee and all of those guys, there are other beneficiaries of them as well, besides Jackson Dart, who, really has to love these guys. But it's the run game. And Ole Miss runs a lot of RPOs and a lot of centric things to play off of putting linebackers in conflict. The way they force your hand, if they're scared generally of the wide receivers, is by, hey, whenever this happens, take the pass read. Recognize it, take the pass read, force the run, which means you're going to be running into lighter boxes. And if Ole Miss can run the ball with Henry Parrish or Ulysses Bentley, which I think those two might be the top 2 running backs in camp, if you go by what I think the Ole Miss Spirit said earlier this week, they have to be effective and make the defense at least worry about them. Ideally, when Ole Miss is clicking offensively at an extremely high level, It is going to be a situation to where the defense just can't be right. And when the offense is really humming, and everybody that has listened to my show for any long period of time, it's about torturing linebackers. That is what this offense does. It tortures linebackers. You need to get to the point where the linebacker just can't be right. He either comes up to to go after the run, go back to the pass, or the jet sweep side to side, where it's a joystick situation where he knows he just cannot be right. And that should be really interesting stuff. Fun stuff. I kind of went off the beaten path a little bit today with the freshmen of fall camp that kind of are earning playing time. I'm going to put air quotes up on that, but we'll see exactly how they go. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which was why we're the #1 Ole Miss podcast out there. And thank you for that. Your support means the world to us. For your second listen today, check out Locked On College Sports, college football with Spencer McLaughlin. He'll get you hyped up for an exciting season and with in-depth discussions of the upcoming games and the ever-evolving landscape of college athletics. From college realignment to the transfer portal to NIL and the new college football playoffs, Spencer covers it all. You can find Locked On College Football on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. They also have a Locked On College Sports live stream. This show and lots of others are showing up there as well. It's really awesome. I'm enjoying that thoroughly. And also exciting news. You can now become a Locked On Ole Miss Insider, the best and easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports. This is a texting program that sends you notifications on everything relevant without the hassle of message boards filled with trolls. Enjoy a 14-day free trial. Experience the future of college sports coverage. We're adding new perks as we grow, so do not miss out. The link is down below in the description. For those of you watching on YouTube, though, we'll send you to Locked On College Sports right now. Howdy toddy, everyone.